He stood in the doorway, staring at me like I was a stranger who'd broken into his home. No words, just that look, cold, hollow, tired. And in that moment, I knew something had broken in him that might never be fixed. My husband, the man who once held me like I was his entire world, now wouldn't even let my shadow brush against him. It's been nearly 2 years since I detonated our marriage with one selfish decision, one that wasn't born from hatred or neglect, but from something far more complicated. Empathetic. Everyone wants to hear a clean answer. Why'd you do it? As if I could point to one bad night or one big fight. I can't, because there was none. Jim was good to me, better than good, but sometimes the worst betrayal doesn't come from someone you hate. It comes from someone you love deeply and still manage to hurt anyway. This is the story of how I lost the man I loved, the family I built, and the self-respect I thought I had because I chased a feeling I couldn't explain with someone I barely even knew. And now I'm standing in the wreckage, wondering if love can survive when trust has been burned to ash, the eyes that undid me. The first time I saw him, I dropped the potato salad. It was stupid, slipped right out of my hands. Plastic bowl cracked open like my brain just forgot what it was doing. Everyone turned to look, laughing, joking. Well, there goes the side dish. But I couldn't move, because across the yard, standing under a crooked string of dollar store lanterns, was a man I'd never seen before. And he looked at me like he already knew me. That was the day everything began to shift. Before the affair, before the post-nup, before Jim wouldn't let me touch him, wouldn't even take food I cooked. Before I moved out and became the mother who visits. It was a Saturday afternoon in suburban Ohio, just your average neighborly barbecue. Jim had been talking with a couple dads about power tools and school fundraisers. I was making small talk with Jenna from 3 doors down when he walked in Mason. He and his wife Chloe had just moved in a few weeks ago. We waved once or twice, nothing more. But the way he looked at me across that backyard, I swear I felt it down to my toes. That thrum, like someone had plucked a string I didn't know was inside me. It was the exact same feeling I had the first time I met Ryan, the guy I lost my virginity to when I was teen. Back then, I'd barely spoken to boys, was all nervous laughter and awkward eye contact. But with Ryan, there was no hesitation. I wanted him instantly. It was animal, unreasonable, and unforgettable. Mason reminded me of that. He had the same intense stare, the same easy confidence. He made me feel 17 again, and that should have been my first red flag. Jim was wearing that old Columbus Blue Jackets tee he always wore to grill. I remember watching him flip burgers, smile at our kids, laugh with the neighbors. I should have looked at him. I should have felt something when I did. But instead, my eyes kept drifting back to Mason, and every time his were already waiting. Later, Jim would tell me he never suspected a thing that day. He thought I was quiet because I was tired. I was, but not in the way he assumed. Because that night after we'd put the kids to bed and Jim had fallen asleep with the TV on, I lay next to him and closed my eyes, and all I could see was someone else's face and touch something untouched. It started with a lie about floor mats. 2 days after the barbecue, Jim remembered Mason worked at the car dealership nearby. Our lease was ending and we were thinking about upgrading to a bigger SUV. Jim made a few calls and set up an appointment. I didn't argue. I offered to handle the follow-up visit on my own. The dealership needed to install mud flaps or something minor, a 15-minute wait tops. But I waited in that plastic-smelling lobby for almost 40 minutes. And when Mason came out from the back office, coffee in hand, smiling like we were old friends, I followed him without hesitation. He waved me into a private room just to go over the payment schedule. I still remember how the fluorescent lights made everything seem unreal, like I was in a dream I couldn't stop. He closed the door gently behind us. "I know this is crazy," he said, his voice low, "but ever since that barbecue, I haven't stopped thinking about you." I should have laughed, should have said something about boundaries, about respect, about being married. I should have walked out, but instead I just stared at him. Because deep down, I'd been waiting to hear those exact words. I wanted to be wanted. I whispered, "We can't do this." He nodded, but his eyes said, "We already are." That night I made pasta for dinner. Jim poured us both glasses of wine. The boys argued about who got the last garlic knot. It was normal, sweet, comfortable. Jim leaned over, kissed my temple, and told me he loved me. And I felt sick because earlier that morning I had stood in another man's office with my pulse hammering in my throat while he told me I made him dizzy, and I liked it. Over the next few weeks, Mason and I exchanged messages, carefully, secretly. I deleted everything, obsessively cleared my call logs, erased every trace. But I couldn't delete the way my body felt when I saw his name light up my phone. It wasn't love, it wasn't even emotional, it was something darker, something reckless. When it finally happened when I crossed the line, I told myself it was just once. I told myself it was meaningless. But when I left Mason's house that morning, my shirt inside out, my wedding ring burning on my finger, I knew something fundamental had changed in me. I didn't feel powerful, I felt hollow. And I hadn't even begun to understand the cost yet, caught in the quietest explosion. She didn't knock. Mason's bedroom door flew open like a scene from a movie, and there she was, Chloe's mom. I didn't even know her name, but I'll never forget her voice. "You disgusting, cheating pigs." I scrambled to grab my clothes, but I barely had a chance. She stormed across the room like a hurricane in church shoes. She slapped Mason so hard, I heard the crack echo off the walls. Then her fingernails came for me. One hand yanked my hair back, the other clawed at my jaw. I still have a faint scar on my cheek, a reminder I never asked for. By the time I made it out the front door, barefoot keys in my shaking hand, I was sobbing so hard I could barely see. The whole world blurred behind tears and shame. I don't know how I drove home without crashing. Inside the house was quiet. The kitchen smelled like coffee and cinnamon toast from breakfast with the boys. I sat on the couch, half dressed, shaken. The clock ticked. The silence screamed. I knew I had to tell Jim, somehow, but I didn't get the chance. By 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with an unknown number, then another and another. I didn't answer. I knew who it was, I just didn't know what they were going to do. Then came the banging on the front door, screaming, threats. Chloe and her mom on the porch pounding their fists against the window, yelling for me to come out. I hid behind the kitchen island like a child whispering, "Please don't let the neighbors see." The boys were at school, thank God. But I knew they'd hear about it soon enough. Everyone in the neighborhood would. This place had always felt like a family. Now it was a firing squad. And then I heard the car door, Jim's. I peeked out the blinds, praying he hadn't heard the commotion. He didn't even look at the house. He walked straight down the street toward Mason and Chloe's. He was gone for 3 hours. When he came back, he didn't walk in. He stood at the doorway staring at me like he'd never seen me before. I tried to run to him to touch him to explain. He flinched. "Step back. Don't," he said quietly. "Just don't." And that's when I knew the explosion hadn't been loud. It hadn't torn through drywall or broken glass. It had landed right in his chest. The man I wounded, that night he packed a bag and slept at his brother's place. He didn't slam the door, didn't yell, just walked past me like I wasn't there, like I was part of the wallpaper. I begged him to talk. I cried until I choked. I tried everything, my voice cracking with desperation, with guilt, but nothing moved him. "I don't accept your apology," he said, "and I want you out. Out. Not let's talk. Not, I need time. Just out." He called my mom, told her what happened, and asked her to come pick me up. I hadn't heard that tone in his voice since his dad died. Cold, controlled, final. I spent that first night in my childhood bedroom curled under an old quilt with cartoon owls on it, feeling like I had time traveled straight back into shame. My mother said nothing for hours, just sat on the edge of the bed rubbing my back like I was 5 again. When she finally spoke, it wasn't what I expected. "I raised you better than this," she whispered. That hurt more than anything Jim had said. The next few days were a fog of text messages left unread and voicemails ignored. I sent him a photo of the kids from when we took them to Disney, a song that used to be our thing, a long letter about how sorry I was. He didn't respond, but one night he finally picked up. "Why are you calling?" he asked. I don't know. I miss you. I miss us." He didn't reply, just breathed into the phone. I asked him how he felt. He said, "You know how I feel," and hung up. I started to unravel. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I stopped checking the time because every hour felt like a reminder I was no longer part of my own life. Then came the message that knocked the wind out of me. I want a divorce. I dropped my phone. I actually screamed. My mom came running in, thought something had happened to the kids. No, I whispered something happened to me, but I couldn't give up, not yet. So I did the only thing I could think of. I hired a lawyer, not to fight him, but to offer him a deal. I'd give him everything, the house, the money, the future, if he'd just stayed just long enough for me to try and fix what I broke. A contract with the ghost of us. He looked at the folder like it might explode. Inside were the postnuptial papers, an agreement so one-sided, every lawyer I consulted warned me not to do it. But I didn't care. If there was even a sliver of a chance I could keep our family together, I'd sign my name in blood. He sat at the kitchen table, silent, thumbing through the pages. If I sign this, he said, flatly, you get nothing if we divorce. No house, no alimony, nothing. I know, I whispered. He kept reading. And you want me to stay married to you for 30 months? Yes, just that. And I'll work. I'll pay my share. You don't even have to talk to me if you don't want to. He looked up, and for the first time in weeks, his eyes softened. Just a little. You're really that desperate. I'm really that sorry. He didn't answer right away. I could see the war behind his eyes. Pride and pain battling it out right there in our sunlit kitchen. Finally, he exhaled. Fine, he said. But on one condition. I nodded, heart pounding. Anything. No intimacy, he said, cool as ice. None. I don't want you touching me. I don't want to wake up next to you. You're not my wife anymore. You're just the mother of my kids. That stung. God, it stung. But I agreed. And just like that, we began our second marriage. We lived under the same roof, but moved like ghosts. He slept in the guest room. We exchanged schedules, not words. I started a job at a local garden center just to fulfill my part of the agreement. Every night I left cookies on the counter for the boys. Every morning Jim swept past them without a glance. He wouldn't even eat the food I made anymore. Said he couldn't trust it, couldn't trust me, and our boys seemed okay, confused maybe. But Jim and I were careful. We smiled in front of them, shared carpool duties. We acted like everything was fine. But it wasn't, not even close. At night, I would lie in my room and wonder if I'd traded a divorce for something worse, a purgatory with the man I loved, who now looked at me like I was already dead. Living like strangers in the same house. Sometimes I'd watch him from the kitchen window. He'd be out back with the guys, laughing, drinking bourbon, flipping burgers on the grill like nothing had happened. Like I wasn't just 10 feet away inside, watching from behind the curtain, with flour on my hands and a hole in my heart. He wouldn't eat anything I made, ever, but he devoured his own grilled steaks like a man who'd earned every bite. I started timing our presence like a puzzle. If he was in the living room, I'd stay in the bedroom. If he took the boys to baseball, I'd volunteer for soccer drop-offs. It was like choreographing a dance for two people who used to know each other's rhythms. And now only moved to avoid stepping on toes. Our sons didn't ask too many questions, and maybe that hurt the most. Maybe they already sensed the distance. Maybe they were learning how silence can live between two people like furniture. Always there, just accepted. The nights were the hardest. He slept with his door locked. I'd sometimes press my forehead to the wood, not to listen, not to knock, just to be near him. It sounds pathetic, I know. But when you've betrayed someone's trust, that deeply proximity feels like mercy. One night I passed him in the hallway after he'd come back from the gym. His shirt was damp with sweat. He smelled like eucalyptus body wash and exhaustion. Our eyes met for just a second. I whispered, "Do you ever think about us?" He paused. I could see his jaw tense. "I think about what we used to be," he said. And then I remind myself it wasn't real. Then he walked away. That broke me. I stopped trying for a while, just went numb. Either threw myself into work, into after-school dinners with the boys, into replanting the garden beds in the backyard. I even stopped reaching for hugs, stopped baking his favorite cookies. Then one day I caught him eating a lemon bar off the counter. My lemon bar. He looked up startled like a kid who got caught. I smiled. "They're still your favorite." He didn't smile back, just nodded once, wiped the crumbs from his fingers, and walked away. It was nothing. And yet, it was the first crack in his armor. But cracks don't always mean a breakthrough. Sometimes they're just reminders that something's still broken, the divorce that saved us, The papers were waiting on the dining table when I got home. No dramatic delivery, no confrontation, just a manila envelope under the vase of half wilted lilies, like it had been sitting there for days. I stared at it for a long time before I had the courage to open it. Final divorce agreement, no alimony, no child support, no more 30-month plan, and then a handwritten note on top in Jim's sharp, no nonsense handwriting, I still care. But I can't stay married to someone I pity. Let me let this go. Maybe then I can see you again. Really see you. I read that sentence over and over until the words blurred. Let me let this go. Not out of hate, not even out of anger, but because he couldn't keep pretending. We met at a diner to sign the final documents, neutral ground. He wore a navy button-down I hadn't seen in years. I wore the necklace he gave me on our 7th anniversary. We didn't speak much until the waitress poured our coffee. You really aren't going to fight for anything? He asked, not looking up. I don't want anything that wasn't freely given, I said. Besides, you earned it. All of it. He nodded, eyes still fixed on the table. I'm not doing this to hurt you, he said finally. I just need to feel like I have a say in my life again. I know, I whispered. After we signed, he leaned back in the booth and said something I wasn't ready for. Let's go out, he said. Not now, but soon. Dinner, no pressure. I blinked. Like a date? He smirked. Like two people who once meant everything to each other. Maybe still do. That night I cried, but not the same way I used to, not the kind of grief that leaves you gasping on the bathroom floor. This time it was quiet, clean, a release. We moved forward like two people stepping onto unfamiliar ground, still cautious, still scarred, but somehow lighter. Jim was no longer my husband, but he smiled when he dropped the boys off. He lingered on the porch. We talked about school pickups and garden mulch. We even laughed again. Once, the marriage died, but something else began to flicker in its place. Not quite a reunion, not quite forgiveness, but maybe, just maybe, a beginning. They say love is stronger than anything, but they forget to mention how fragile trust is, how quickly it crumbles under the weight of betrayal, and how hard, how impossibly hard it is to rebuild something once it's cracked. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes love doesn't survive inside the walls we build for it. Sometimes marriage, this sacred, beautiful contract, becomes a cage when it's been poisoned by secrets, and the only way to set each other free is to let go. Jim and I didn't get the fairy tale ending I once dreamed of. We didn't renew our vows or fall back into each other's arms, but we did find something else, a fragile peace, a strange new closeness built not on romance, but on honesty, and maybe even a kind of friendship. If you're listening to this and hurting, if you've made a mistake you can't undo, or you've been on the receiving end of a betrayal that gutted you, please know this: healing doesn't always mean going back. Sometimes it means stepping away. Sometimes it means letting go of who you were to become who you need to be. And if you ever find yourself wondering, can we come back from this? Know that the answer might not be what you expect, but it can still be something beautiful. Thank you for being here with me through this story. If it made you feel something, anything, consider sticking around. There are more stories like this, more voices, more heartbreak, more hope. Hit subscribe, leave a thought, or just sit with it in silence. Either way, I'm grateful you listen. Until next time, take care of your heart and the hearts of those who trust you with theirs.